I don't know if you want that we have a sort of frame, or somebody want simply jump into the discussion, but maybe I have some topic that we can use as a track. First of all, maybe I have a general question. Did everybody fully understand the presentation of Sébastien Grosset? Did you all follow? Do you have any problem with the French? I was not. Yeah, some of you, okay. So I don't know how much to relate to that. That's why I was questioning. I think that was a very good point of connection between all of you, because it was quite radical. I look in this way, this direction, because the camera is there, and I think that it's very helpful, because it was maybe something that can help to have like a structure that maybe could be in all this time. First of all, I noticed a sort of interesting for what somebody of you call the vertical frame. It was in particular, I think there was Jan that talked about the contrast between the vertical and the horizontal structure in the atmospheric. But I think more large, in particular with the starting exactly from Sebastian's presentation, because when you talk about the tectonic, the underground situation, the architecture as elevation, we can find really like a sort of cross-section between all the way you treated the arguments, and I find a lot of exchange between high and low, if I can say, with the title of a famous movie of Kurosawa, that's about the contrast about rich people and low people and poor people, but more or less about high culture and low culture. We have seen examples that are very, I don't know, very established from Baroque architecture, etc. But they use quite the same technique of the most popular space as you presented in the movies, theater of 20s or 30s. To not mention once more one of the passages of Sebastian when you were talking about Las Vegas and all this connection between the deep philosophical description you were making with the most prosaic space we can imagine, no? And so first things maybe we can try to look at these different aspects and see what is maybe the nocturnal atmosphere. It's a place where we can really meet all the condition of architectures. And I mean, it's also the emergency and what is more classical, if we can use this word. A second point maybe I still refer to Sebastian, because he like proposed to us the interiority through the night. The interiority is the essence of the architecture. If I think especially to the rooms, the night rooms that Nick just presented, it's maybe another point we can discuss. And finally, this more coming a lot from Nick again, it's can we nocturnalize architecture, if I can use this neologism? It's what's happened if we really take as good our nocturnal history architecture and we switch all the architecture, thinking about the architecture, starting from the interior to exterior, from a nocturnal base. Okay, maybe it's even too much to discuss. We want to start. And so maybe I asked to Sebastian to speak in English.
No, I can try. I can try, but only troglodyte English, if you want. No, I don't know, Roberto, if all of you of this question, but maybe can I continue with this question of the because it could be have a link with this question of control of the light, because of the artificial light, because in the Platonian allegory, the control who controls the light is not asked. It's a strange question, because some people have a foyer for a simulacre, but no question who is these people, why some people are prisoner, and why some people make another thing. And I don't know why Platon is exact that, but just one thing, the question of the control of artificial light is the question of the humanity. If you know that the first artificial light is just the fire, if you control the fire, you control the most basic artificial light, and it's a very important question. It's not only a question for today or for actually. It's a question of the distinction. The human is the people who can control artificial light, but in the I don't know, in the actual artificial light, maybe we have a differences. It's we split two conditions of the fire is, okay, fire is light, but fire is hotness too. And I don't think exactly, but it's not a replay, it's just a reflection about that. But I don't see what's the real implication in the actual artificial night and the actual war for artificial, Nouvelle Guerre du Feu, war for artificial night, the question of separating light and fire. And I don't know if it's a new repartition, and maybe, as the suggestion of Roberto, with places, I don't know which thing is in which plates, but maybe can we have a new repartition, hotness in some part. I don't know if it's up or down, or if it's outside or inside, and maybe light in another part. I don't know exactly. It's just a reflection about your suggestion that maybe can we think about a new mapping of this question, of this very old Guerre du Feu, very old war for fire, and actually, if we continue the conquest of artificial light, and if we can split light and hotness, maybe can we thinking about a new geography of that? But I have no more hypothesis as just propose this perspective. I don't know if j'apporte quelque chose. And I not reply to your question, Roberto, with that. But
for me, it's hard to manage you because you're in my back, so it's hard to look in your eyes. But if somebody want to replay to Sebastian, it's more. Otherwise, maybe you can go forward with your second. You have another replay?
Only me? I'll make all of the...
You start the fire. So
no, I don't know right immediately, no. Please, I cannot replay to all of the question. What you want. If I search, no, I don't know, just right now, Roberto.
For me, maybe I can add something to that, even though maybe we are moving away from the framework Roberto was proposing, but that's also part of the game. Like most participatory processes that I know as of today of urban planning and urban design, when you see the meetings and the discussions around the shape that new districts might take in contemporary cities, sometimes you get the picture of people discussing around a scale model. This is quite classic kind of setup. I know also some architects, like for example in Madrid, who are doing a lot of new districts in Vienna, in Austria, through video games, for example. Like they are displaying like platforms so that communities can interact on video games to shape or to try to shape districts together. And there is always a kind of segmentation of different groups of society that have to take part in the discussion so that all differences are incorporated to the discussion, such as the developers, politicians, urban planners, communities, etc. However, what I realize is that in most of the cases, the default modelization of this kind of urban identity is diurnal, is daytime. And for me, this comes back to the hypothesis of the symposium, which is a question that we have to address, which is architectural thinking and urban planning thinking still diurnal by default? Meaning by that there are a lot of forms of resistance and forms of exceptions to that, but it's still the mainstream production of practice and discourse and way of thinking and image and way of doing the image of architecture is still diurnal by default, yes or not?
Also, I would add that since we referred a lot to this book, if we go back to Jonathan Crary, if it's true that we go more and more towards a 24/7 and a life that unfolds as much as by night than by day, then we need to change the way we think and represent architecture. I don't know.
Maybe you can cross question between you. It's a round table. I can continue.
Because but just to continue, I had never thought. Before coming here, I had never thought about this thing that most of architecture representation are by day. I mean, it's obvious, but it's if you don't pay attention to it. And for example, that project, and it would be interesting to ask him why, but that project by La Pietra is completely represented by night. There is no day view. So, yeah. So this question is quite interesting, I think. But maybe, yeah.
I could even add that pedagogically, we was taught always to work with daylight. Putting the rooms in the north and the sitting room in the south and all these things, but we never ask where is the TV and if we could build a project around it, as a starting point. So of course it's changing the way you think of a project, and of course the fire of the past becomes the TV of today, which becomes a small mobile phone of tomorrow. Voila. And then the question of who is controlling lights becomes more and more obvious and economical, of course.
I don't know, help to for example, because we are talking a lot about control. If I took to Alexandra's presentation, it's like a propaganda control. No? It's deeper in the creation of sensibility and the structure of the. It doesn't go to the direct control to oblige people to do one thing, but to convince more under the mood, under the feelings of the entire society and the difference. I think that was very convincing, this corridor. Before I supposed to enter to the main chamber, Poland chamber, that was quite cold, but very exemplary for this idea, and it seems there were no window too, so it's really a place that you can control in the form of Sebastian was talking today, Alessandra?
It's a very good point of view, and what you said, it's right, redirects some of the feelings and some of the viewings of socialist realism, but for sure, it is the matter of controlling. It was totalitarian state, and it is simple to say, because it was expressed directly, that artificial light we can control. And we want the artificial light because we want the control. And we want also control by this, the feelings and emotions. So, as Roberto said, no daylight, in fact, no windows, and we just project and design very certain feelings and emotions. The very good point of view, I think, and very new for me, is also redirecting this thinking about night view of the architecture as, excuse me, as I was trying, when I was preparing this presentation, I was trying to find any pictures of palaces of lights, that means Vysotkas, at night from the 50s and from the socialist realist period, and there were none, because only this controlling of light, but inside light, was important. And it was impossible to find outside this light, because there wasn't, in fact. The only possible imaginations and vision of this were done in 70s, in 80s, and of course nowadays, when it is more visible outside, yes, but it wasn't in the 50s. So thank you for showing me and very interesting points of view, and this Nocturnal change and revolution in thinking, also according to this older architecture, I think is very valuable. Excuse me.
Are you finished? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you. Another thing also I think about interiority and exteriority that came back in a lot of presentation is also what kind of light, because it's like artificial light, but as you say, there is fire, there is the glow of the TV, there's the neon, there's the LED light, or the, I think we're still maybe because it's maybe in that comprehension of the architecture of the night, there is a step further to do into, Nick is doing it a little bit, but in tracing also the differentiation between all those different kind of artificial light and what do they mean for the night or the day, or so. For example, Roberto mentioned high and low. Of course, the neon is quite an interesting source of light that is different from other sources of artificial light.
One thing is sure, at the night it's more easy to the building, to the interior of the building, to reappropriate the light. It's sure to be this own representation, and you can see some question of politics of the collectivity. If you think about this question for a collective building. And you have some experiences to try to transmit a message or something with internal artificial light of, for example, I don't know, in some squats you try to make I don't know in English un calendrier de l'Avent. You know that I have seen this kind of thing, and Advent calendar is the same, and it necessitates some discussion and some collaboration. It could be an interesting way to investigate it. Because it's one thing if you think about just the interior or the interiority, but if you think as for example in a collective building, there is not one interior, there is some interiors with some lights, and you can retry a new I don't know, même en français je saurais pas dire, a new pact, a new social pact into the building to represent himself with the collective inside light. It's I am understandable, or my English is okay. Okay.
Or as Nick said, to say that to pretend that there's someone who lives there when there is not. So there's a lot of different.
Yeah. Not just receive. If the building will not just receive the light of the outside, it must develop a politic, a small society of the light.
Yeah, I think I was more also trying to find something that kind of links all the presentation together, because I think also in Carlota and Jan, you mentioned it a bit, right? That there were different types. This is very weird. I don't know where to look. That there were different types of light in those theater, right?
Carlota, you want to say a word? Totally, yes. I think we spoke a little bit about it when we actually how do you depict an artificial sky during the night in a closed box? It's by lighting. So, but the lighting is simulating the moon and the stars, and so he framed through scenography. So, and even if there is some pictures that show how the interior of the scenography were lightened from a fictional inside, which was actually on the surface of the ceiling. So it's a very tricky series of tricks that build this artificialization of the night. Jan, maybe you want to.
Yeah, I would like to add some thoughts, but not on the way of lighting our atmospheric theaters, but more on the idea of nocturnalizing architecture that was evoked a minute ago, and bring to the discussion somebody who appears to me as a precedent, Etienne. In a very depressed moment of his life, he had a walk during the night, and suddenly this night and most of all the shadow of the cast by the moon was a revelation for what he called later the architecture of shadow, and in this description, which is in the essay on the art, I think we see the night as a source of inspiration, but more in an aesthetic way. And when I hear the proposition of a nocturnalizing the architecture, I hear a challenge, just like in a contemporary question, just like the question of how can we fly today without polluting the atmosphere. And I mean, how is it possible to build new machines that are not in absolute control of the atmosphere like the planes, but more in a negotiation with with nature and for instance the wind forces. And maybe this idea of a closer relationship between the architecture and the light, natural light condition. There is the same challenge of a softer relation to the light condition or absence of light.
Maybe I have another suggestion. It's I don't know. It's also to involve, for example, Frosny, but also Muriel in the discussion, because I think what is more surprising of all this deep research into the darkness, the interior, etc., that we rediscover the representation of the astronomical. It's the most strong images, architectural images you show was, I think, somewhat towards in the presentation of once more of the atmospheric theaters. Some obviously you show the Newton cenotaph, and also the other building that was at the same time. But this makes me think it a lot more, because these things comes a lot in the presentation of Frosny and obviously in Muriel. But it is something very constant. I mean, in the fact that with the light, we can see the sky, of the density of the sky, the spatiality of the sky. And that is something that seems constant in the necessity that you had to present that in the interiors. And if I have to use one image for all this seminar as a project, I will present, I hope that everybody knows that, but it's the famous setting design for the Magic Flute by Schinkel for the palace of the night, the queen of the night. It's this famous stars ordered half vote. It's quite very strong image of what you can do with the night in architecture. And I don't know, it's more, I don't know, I want to hear the reaction, maybe Muriel, Fresney, and AOC, maybe Hilary, that you're also talking about the exterior of, obviously, Martin too. It's.
Thank you. There's so many points that are actually of interest and I wanted to follow up on. I just did not want to interrupt the discussion that was going on. So first of all, what is interesting to sort of see through all these presentations and where the conversation has gone from yesterday to today is, yes, lighting has changed. The nature of lighting has changed. And also our needs of lighting have changed. So I don't know whether lighting has changed because of our differing needs or our needs have changed because lighting has changed. So for example, with the use of fire, like Sebastian said, the warmth of fire is now seen as not so positive in terms of experiencing public spaces anymore. We need much more light-washed spaces. So LED technology takes over the illumination of public spaces. And with that, we kind of tend to lose the warmth of these spaces because LED technology automatically is much colder in terms of the illumination of these spaces. So all of a sudden, our public space is becoming colder spaces to experience. So this is something that I've been thinking about when Sebastian was talking, but also the fact that the external illumination of buildings has now changed as well. And internally, we tend to go for more light flooded spaces, which kind of wash out shadows. So instantly our experience and our perception of these spaces is very different. So going back to what Nick was talking about, the over-illumination, it's as if we're kind of scared of allowing shadows, or because our eyes are not trained anymore in such dark conditions, we don't find these spaces comfortable anymore. So it's quite interesting to see. And then again, going back to what Sebastian was talking about, control. So who controls what our experience should be like? Yes, within our houses and our domestic spaces, we tend to control the amount of light that we have. But in public spaces or in communal spaces, our experience is completely controlled by the people who decide how we should be experiencing these spaces. So I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm just throwing out some thoughts that I've had while I've been listening to everyone.
I don't know exactly, but so there is one thing maybe. The question of the deep sky as an environment and the question of control maybe could be crossing at the question of the face-to-face for me. There is something maybe if we are so interesting to this deep space aroundness and to atmosphere, is maybe we discover that the access as the true is not as an access as an object. And in the day, with a direct light, you can see something. You can be here and see this thing. And maybe this great interest, actually, to the aroundness. Can we use aroundness? It's a real word. Okay. To the aroundness, it's maybe something of this possibility. And I think too about your presentation, the television was just an object, and I see the object in one moment, and after with a continual television, it's not necessary to be in face-to-face with the television, because you can have a television here and maybe two television as in your presentation. And the same thing in the difficulties to have a differentiation between the scan and the sail, the stage and the sail in your example of scenography. And maybe this question of night architecture is this question too. It's not so easy to consider the differentiation between I and this wonderful building I can see, and I try to control. I don't have the control of the light, sorry, but I have the control of my vision, because I can have a very, very precise distinction between me and between an object. And all the architecture, sculpture, architecture with monumental and wonderful. It's maybe it's the end of that, and it could be I don't know, but it could be a part of the explication for the interest for interior, for atmosphere. And you know, interiority, the real signification of interiority is not the same of interior or inside. It's the quality of interior. It's not a space. Interiority. It's an atmosphere. It's not a spatial concept, and it's not possible to see the interior too, because you have in some. I have a part of the interior here, and I cannot see, and the world is not like you, flat sur un écran comme ça. It's not that, and I don't know. It's not a very building replay, but maybe something like that, I suppose. We discover or rediscover that to have access at the world and at the through, we must participate. We must be in an environment and now see face to face, I suppose.
So I saw finally a lot of hands up. So Hilary, then Nick, then Muriel.
Thank you. This is a very interesting discussion. So thank you to everybody that's spoken so far. I guess I just want to follow on from something that Nick said a few minutes ago, and also from Frosny, as just mentioned about privatization of public space. And I think that part of the problem in the UK is that people aren't actually sure necessarily what's public space and what is private space. And I know that the geographer Bradley Garrett has written on this extensively, that if you go into London now, you can be walking along the Thames in certain sections, and there will be multiple signage, prohibition signage, telling you exactly what you can and can't do, even how many dogs you're allowed to walk, because you're actually passing through private space. So I just wanted to mention that. So I guess fundamentally what I've realized over these 2 days is that one of the things I'm predominantly interested in is not just the history of light, but also how light and darkness is manipulated to say things about historical points in time. And so an example of that is, I guess, in Germany, in the city of Cologne, the cathedral switched off its lights when an anti-Muslim demonstration was taking place. And so that kind of political use of darkness I also find quite interesting. And this is a completely unrelated point that's just popped into my mind, but it follows on from what Frosny, I hope I've mispronounced, if I mispronounced your name again, I'm so paranoid about saying your name wrong, was saying about how light has changed. And I'm just reminded that we carry light with us. If we got a mobile phone, we've got a light device on us. And or if we smoke cigarettes, we've got another way of creating light and fire. And I was in the local supermarket recently, and somebody asked the cashier behind the desk for a box of Swan Vesta, which is a type of match. And the cashier didn't actually know what they were. And so, you know, we're not carrying matches around with us anymore necessarily like we used to, but we're all carrying these forms of light and also forms of fire in our pockets. And when I go to live music now, big concerts, my experience of being in stadiums and concert spaces is really different, because people have their cameras out all the time, or they're using the lights on their phones at particular points in the concert space. So I just don't want to kind of lose that kind of temporality and ephemerality of lighting, but also encroaches on our daily lives. Okay, I'll stop now.
Nick?
It was just a quick point, really, following on from what Efrosini and Hilary have been saying. I did mention this briefly when I spoke, but it's not just that lighting's changed, but it's also architecture's changed. I mean, there was a question earlier about all these towers going up in Manchester. A lot of what consists of contemporary architecture, sadly, certainly here in the UK, I hope it's different where some of you are, is cheap. It's flat in terms of the facade because that's easier to clean. It's a lot of steel and glass and cheap cladding panels. And so the opportunities for both architects and interior architects to be able to perhaps manipulate space are somewhat reduced than they may have been were we to go back some way in time. And the other thing with this, of course, is to do with function. You could walk in a contemporary apartment in a city like Manchester and it not be so different to do with the lighting and the construction quality as an office block or even a retail space. So I think there's something about how architecture itself, its literal construction, has largely been flattened and reduced, and perhaps the opportunities, the niches, the shadows, all those examples I showed of the soot still clinging to buildings, that wouldn't happen in the same way if you took today's buildings and put them back then, because it just wouldn't work in the same way. So it was just to make that point. I'll be very quick because there's other hands and a great discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Muriel and then Martin.
So yeah, that's more some kind of reflection come to my mind with the discussion. And I was really impressed actually by the first first day from Efrasni, sorry if I don't pronounce it well. Well, coming to the point, who have the control of the light? I think about, it was mainly women who maintained the fire into the temples. So it's a more question, I don't know. But actually in Japan as well, the temple or the Shinto temple were also long time preserved by women. Nevertheless, the man would have the power, only the man would have the power who make divination. And in Japan, there were some women who make divination. So just question of control of the fire and control of the power. And coming to nowadays, I'm wondering, because of course the light have changed, it's no more fire or candles or moon viewing, but more a network of electricity. So I wonder if the power is not only on the light, but on the production of electricity, how it's done, how it's made. And of course, also not only the light, but the control of the networks. So where are we connected with our iPhone or not, or behind the screen? Well, that's just some idea that pop up to my mind. And then in Nick's presentation, I also was impressed by this light area. And I just also catch what Hilary say about temporality and ephemerality. And maybe that's also one point. If the light is always there, we forgot it's there. So if we shut down the light, then suddenly we discover something. So maybe there is also something to think about, this idea that the light could be also there for a few moments, or that could be some change into the light. So that could be something interesting for the design. So that's just some idea that's pop up to my mind, not really related to Japan, but more to the general discussion. Thank you.
Okay, maybe Martin?
Yes. I'm going back actually to Nick's previous point. But I mean, just reacting to Muriel, just while you were talking, I was actually thinking about the whole current debate about the risk, the increasing risk of blackouts because of the energy crisis and so on, which actually, if you start thinking of blackouts as designed events, that actually might also be productive somehow. But coming back to Nick's previous point, I was actually thinking also during Nick's presentation, but also during other presentations, that you could say the call for, or this kind of concern with the nocturnalization is perhaps can be almost translated or sort of weighed against a more general idea of differentiation. And I think, Nick, you actually used the word of differentiation. So that in a way, bringing in the nocturnal is actually a way of bringing in a discussion about generating or imposing or allowing differences on various ways in processes, ways of occupancy, uses, and so on and so forth. But if you bring it then back to architecture, I was actually struck by, again, when you refer to flatness and so on, about the degree to which that thinking about light actually also calls for thinking about matter and materiality and the density. I mean, sort of, you could say in ancient thinking, I mean, the darkest thing is matter. Yeah? But also it's, you could say, in the manipulation of matter, that light, I mean, we say that it takes light to create darkness, but it's only through the manipulation of matter that the play between light and darkness becomes visible. And perhaps, and as a kind of little side note, when Sebastian was speaking, I was thinking of the fact that obviously the whole origin myth of architecture in Vitruvius, which starts with fire, is the introduction to the book on matter, on materiality. So it's the invention of fire that basically directs human attention towards materials in order to start building. So obviously with the double meaning of light, matter, matter as something that has weight, but that also needs to be manipulated and that can be given relief, and that as the matter that can be given relief or a kind of polish is exactly the kind of thing that sort of can make present darkness somehow in our cities and in our built environment. So that was just so, because again it's in say the manipulation of matter that the differentiation in architecture basically occurs, and that architecture becomes present.
Thank you. That's any other replica? We start to be tired. It's 5. It's perfectly 5. So, oh yeah. Sorry. So excuse me, Carlotta. No, go, please. It's
no.
I don't want to cut nobody.
No, it's a general reflection starting from Martin 1 already to continue. Actually, in a general way, I would say that switching the point of view, as Sebastian say, going from the myth of the hut to the myth of the cave is a way to switch the point of view of the origin of architecture, which I think it's a very good way to explain us. And I would say that for many of us, it was a very westernized, centrated. So for us, it was a way to try to propose another less dominant way to see some episode of history of architecture, so to switch a little bit the point of view. And I would say that maybe Muriel proposes us something that it's really different, because it's, I think the value of the moon, this presence, and the value in architecture, in Japanese architecture, is much more dominant. I would say that I mean, the Katsura house, we see how was conceived to have a look to this element of nature. So I would it's just a reflection that I got about this opposition, how nature in a westernized conception is always seen a kind of opposition with the artifice of building. And there are many other ways, of course, of thinking to this relationship. Just a point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, all of you, and has been intense, very interesting, very stimulating too. And I want to thank all the people that are not the guests in this moment. I mean, the people that are here in the room, starting from Paul, David, for the technical part, Valentin, Ines, that's where your contribution was essential, Valentina, and also Vera that already had to left. Also, if she was part of a scientific committee on the curator too of a seminar. And before to thank all of you. And maybe to close with something more technical, that to ask to who are you that have not seen their presentation, if you can send as soon as possible. And for the final test, as you know, we want to do a books as soon as possible, and we already talked about that. So I don't want to be the police controller of the darkness of your writing, but pushing for that to give more light to the world. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you, and I hope to the next time we'll be all in present here. Thank you to you too, Sim. Thank you. Thank you. Well, see you soon. Bye. Ciao. Ciao.
Thank you, Roberto. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.